Hello and welcome to this empath call for the Empowering Empaths group. And I'd like to welcome Natty Asherah, who's our speaker this evening. And we met on LinkedIn as fellow empaths, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah. So if you have a business, use the hashtag empath on LinkedIn and you'll meet some really, really interesting people. I've met lots of people that way. And Natty is the breast cancer journey specialist, aren't you?
Yeah.
Lovely. And that's how we got talking, because in my family there's been a history of breast cancer. My sister had breast cancer, my grandmother did, and I've always felt quite vulnerable that way myself. So and everyone knows someone now, don't they, who either has or is challenged with that. And as empaths, there's a new dimension, isn't there, too? And when we were talking about all the things about the empath that we felt didn't fit, and maybe we didn't even know we were an empath. I think I only really realised about 2 years ago, and now we know if we can embody that, then it can take us forward powerfully. So over to you, Natty, and you're going to give us some tips, aren't you, of how we can step into that, and also you're going to lead us through a meditation towards the end as well, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, because I think that's really important to kind of have that experiential. We learn by doing, don't we? And we learn by experiencing. So I think that's really important.
Beautiful.
So yeah, thanks for that welcome, Rosemary. So feel free also to sort of butt in and ask questions and things like that, because I think that sort of helps draw out information. So where to start? So obviously, I mean, I work with women on a breast cancer journey. So my business and the way I work is very much geared towards health. And I've always known from my own journey that there was an emotional root to the breast cancer. So I live with breast cancer. And I was diagnosed in 2013, and I always instinctively knew there was a root cause, and I always very much felt that was emotional, because I knew I had a lot of trauma from childhood. So I always felt that if I can just resolve all of that trauma in childhood, then I'm sure my breast cancer is going to clear up. Well, resolving all your childhood trauma is quite a journey in and of itself anyway, as I'm sure Rosemary, and probably most of the people listening. But what I have come across in more recent years that I've been diving into is the fact that, and at the roots of illness, illness starts with an emotional trigger, unless there's a poisoning element to the disease. So there's an emotional trigger which we didn't expect. It catches us off guard, and we didn't have the resources to deal with it, and we felt alone with it. These are the components of that kind of disease trigger. And then what that sets off in the body is something called a biological program. Now, what the body of work that I'm actually referencing is something called German New Medicine, and you can go and look that up for yourself.
It's German New Medicine.
Yeah, German New Medicine. It's an incredible body of work. So, and what that shows us is that the roots of disease always have this emotional component, this emotional trigger. So I was kind of right in that, yes, it's a trauma, but what I realized when I found this work is that actually I was kind of looking in the wrong place for the resolution, and that the trigger actually was much more recent. So it was within the couple of years before the disease actually manifested. So yeah, that's a key piece of information, I think, that's useful to know. And it's not that the childhood trauma isn't relevant. I believe that actually, of course, it sets up defenses and patterns and things that we carry in our body, in our field, that kind of set us up to be more easily sort of triggered by the world and other people and things like that. And then, of course, we've got this added component of sensitivity and being an empath, and how that plays into it all. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Excuse me, I'll just have a drink of water.
And can I just ask you, are you finding, in my world, I think more and more people are opening up and being empathic than ever were before. So this, what we're talking about, is a much bigger body of work than it would be, for instance, 5 or 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this has been growing for a while, hasn't it? It over, you know, I think ever since, well, the start of it was sort of Freud and diving into psychology and the psyche and all of that, and that kind of started this movement of looking into the mind and how the mind operates. And of course, that's then been a trajectory that people have taken the baton with and carried on with decade by decade. So I'm very glad to be alive in this time.
And there seem to be certain points where people's hearts are almost cracked open. Where what, sorry? People's hearts are almost cracked open.
Yeah.
Really big events. Now, it feels like they've got a bigger purpose for me. COVID, one of them, Princess Diana dying, things like that, where there's this huge outpouring of grief. And I remember I always kind of look at it and go, wow, we don't go back from that.
No, that kind of moved the nation in a really interesting way, didn't it?
Yeah, there have been others.
Yeah, she really represented something for us that it wasn't up until that point obviously there in the royal family at all. She brought a very different energy in. So going on to the sort of empath and sensitivity, I was curious, actually. I don't profess to be an expert here at all, and much of what I speak of very much comes from my own experience, my own journey, and just sort of finding out bits of information and then exploring them in myself. And one of the things I was curious about since our conversation and leading up to having this call tonight was, well, what's the difference between a highly sensitive person and an empath? So I did a little bit of research, and I found the work of a lady called, I think she's called Judith Orloff. I don't know if you've come across her. Yeah,
I've got her book here.
Right, she looks like she's got some amazing books and resources. Her website is great, and even her blog is really good.
And she's a psychiatrist, isn't she?
Yeah. And what I found interesting, she describes this spectrum, this empath narcissist spectrum of at one end you've got empaths, and at the other you've got the characters who are more narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic in nature. And actually she calls that, so I think of that as more personality disorders. She calls it an empath deficiency disorder. Wow. I really love that.
Interesting.
And it really makes sense. So there's this spectrum, and in the middle of the spectrum are kind of just normal, loving, connected human beings. They're not particularly highly sensitive, but they're loving, connected human beings. And then to this side, obviously you've got the sort of move towards that more sort of disorder element of it. And to this side, you've got the highly sensitive person. And then right at the end of this spectrum, you've got empaths. So she says basically empaths are highly sensitive people. But she says, so let me just clarify. So highly sensitive people include empaths, but not every highly sensitive person is an empath. So you can understand that by looking at the spectrum. And she says basically the difference is that highly sensitive people and empaths all have in common the fact that they need more alone time, they love time in nature, they have a hard time with large groups, they, what are the other things? Like they're just really sensitive to
It can be noise, can't it? And
well, that's the empath. So she draws the distinction between, she's saying the empath is the one who really picks up subtle energies from the field. So yes, but you're right, they do, you know, they're more sensitive to their environment, sounds, sights, noises, smells, things like that. And they need they need more downtime to recover from stimulation because they can't handle stimulation so well. But the empath is the one who really picks up on the environmental subtle energies that are there that no one else really tunes into. And I think when an empath's been brought up in an environment that doesn't have that understanding and it isn't supported, and quite often empaths seem to end up in families where there's nobody else in the family like them. So they don't have somebody around them who can really hold what they are and let them know that what they're feeling, what they're picking up on is valid, so they can't have their experience validated. So they end up growing up feeling like there's something wrong with them. And then, of course, generally in the culture, they're not understood either, or they're seen as oversensitive and there's something wrong with them. So I think as empaths, it's really hard for most of us to really understand our value and our worth, because we could often feel so different from the rest of society. And we also, because of our sensitivity, then when we're basically absorbing all of this stuff from our environment, and people who are unaware and don't have that sensitive aspect to their nature then end up projecting their stuff and their judgments and everything like that onto the empath or the sensitive, which then further compounds this lack of value and this lack of self-worth. So, I mean, I think each of us has our own version of I'm not good enough in some way. And whether we're in the journey of overcoming that, still dealing with it, still having it come up, being triggered, it's something that's it's always going to be in us. But as we resolve our emotional wounds, then we can learn to love ourselves more compassionately and actually be in the world knowing our own value and really bringing our gifts to the world. Is that making sense so far?
It is, and what excites me is there are a lot of women in the group who've joined because they've got empathic children and they want more help to nurture, care for, support their children, which is absolutely wonderful, isn't it? Which I think is, why it's so important for these kind of things to happen, isn't it? These conversations to be out there.
That's really beautiful. So the women in the group, are they empaths themselves, or is this just something they're recognizing about their children?
It's both, but
yeah.
There were what one lady said. She's a social worker and she struggles to sleep because of the overload of her day. She's in the group, and she said, and her daughter's looking the same way.
Right.
Yeah, and so there is that real need as a parent, as a mother, to guide, isn't it, and to protect your child as best you can. Yeah, and we just got someone coaching us.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful to hear that. It really shows the culture's changing. I think there's been a lot more sort of this attachment parenting coming into the mainstream, thankfully, and just really understanding what children need and how to honour it. And of course that also comes with the fact that we need to deal with our own wounds as parents. And I'm not a parent, by the way, but I have had to learn to parent my own little inner one.
Nor am I, interestingly. Yeah.
Right.
So
there is. So we've covered the German New Medicine and the emotional roots of disease, just very briefly. And then this empath sensitive nature. Now, what I've seen through my own journey with being an empath, and I didn't know I was an empath like you. I didn't really, I noticed my empathic nature, and I read the book by Elaine Aron, The Highly Sensitive Person. I don't know when, actually, maybe 20 years ago. And it did really impact me. But funnily enough, I kind of read the book and resonated with a lot of it, but thought, oh no, I don't think that's me. I don't know why I thought that, but no, that can't be me. Because the environment that I grew up in, I had two mothers, a birth mother and an adoptive mother. And my adoptive mother, who brought me up, she was a very wounded woman herself, and had never really looked at her own stuff. So she was quite domineering. She could be quite, she was very strict, very harsh, sometimes violent, and aggressive. So like, I've spent most of my childhood feeling terrified. And also what I found was, when my emotional vulnerability came up, when I expressed vulnerability, it would actually trigger her. So my experience was that when I was in my most vulnerable state, I got attacked. So, you know, after a while of that happening, children have to survive. So I learned to defend myself against that, and kind of almost two things: block out the outside world as much as possible, which is kind of impossible, but on some level I was doing it. But also shut down and not show any emotion at all. So I used to do all of my emotional vulnerability on my own. And that's how I got through my childhood, and never show any emotion. So, and the reason I'm sharing that is just to describe the sort of defensive structures that we can create. And I'm sure each one of you is going to have your own flavor of that, because we're all unique in the way we wired up because of the experiences we had. So I didn't think I was sensitive, because when I read that book, I was still living behind these walls. And yet I could also recognize, since reading that book and through the trainings that I did, that there was a sensitivity there, and there was definitely empathy. I mean, I always had masses of empathy for people and animals and everything. But what it really began to dawn on me, not the label empath, but there was something going on that I was able to pick up in the field. So, for example, whenever I was in a group, say doing some training or in a circle or something like that, I would often get very strong feelings, and eventually they became intolerable to sit with. So I would have to share it, which was actually, you know, the first few times I did that was very uncomfortable. But what I found when I shared in a group was that all of a sudden people would, you know, I'd say, oh, I'm experiencing this is going on. And I feel really awkward about it. And then practically everybody else in the group would say, oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, me too. And it happened so18 that eventually it started pissing me off, because I thought, why isn't anybody else saying anything? But of course, now I realize they're kind of all feeling it, but it doesn't somehow register in their system enough to move them to say anything. And I'm the one who is absorbing all of this from what's around me, to the point where it's exacerbated 100 times, and I'm feeling it really intensely. So I began to realize through experiences like that there was a sensitivity going on. There was an empathy with the field. But I can't say I particularly liked it always. I didn't understand that actually it could be a gift. And then an example of sort of absorbing subtle energies from the field was there's been few instances when I've gone into different spaces where and things will move through me very somatically and emotionally. That's how they come through me, and I think it can be slightly different for everybody. But for instance, going into an exhibition, there's a ship in Bristol called the SS Great Britain, and you can go and visit it. It's like a museum, it's great. But in there, they describe how this ship was brought home from the Falklands. And I was on board the ship, you know, looking at all the information and things like that. And all of a sudden, this energy just starts to move through me, and I start crying, which I find very embarrassing because I'm in public, and yeah, I didn't like doing things like that at the time. But it wasn't the first time it happened where I'd walked into a space and I'm picking up something in the field. Now that energy felt very nostalgic to me, but it was just interesting to feel that energy, which wasn't mine. I was feeling great that day, and all of a sudden this moves through, and you know, within 5-10 minutes it's gone. So definitely there's this sensitivity to the environment and this picking up of this subtle energy. So what Judith Orloff is saying really does resonate with me, and I found really helpful. So coming back to what I want to touch on is this. We as empaths, we have a real gift, and we don't always understand it as a gift because we've had that childhood quite often where we haven't been supported in who we are, and we're picking everything up in the field, and it feels very confusing, and nobody else can validate our reality. And quite often we might be attacked in some way for our sensitivity or told we're too overly sensitive. Then, of course, we're going to have these emotional wounds and these traumas that we carry in our field until we deal with them.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that the gift of empaths and sensitives is our feeling nature. But it can be a real double-edged sword, because until we actually resolve those wounds and those traumas from childhood, we're sensitive to everything. And we can't tell what's ours, what's other people's. We can't really feel who we are, because we're kind of reacting to everything all the time. So it can feel very chaotic, disturbing. It can be hard to function. I mean, I'm describing my own experience. Until we start to really clear those emotional, energetic layers that are held in our body.
And I'm guessing also, if you have someone comes to you who's had a breast cancer diagnosis in a family, you get a lot of different opinions and thoughts, don't you, as well as, and you can get so lost in that, can't you? And as an empath, you don't want to let anyone down by not doing what they feel like you ought to do, don't you? The old people pleaser comes in. And
yeah.
I admired my sister so much because her husband thought she should do one thing, and it was just, no, I'm doing this.
Great.
So full of respect for her courage. He was saying, no, that won't work for me. I'm doing this.
Yeah, fantastic.
But boy, it takes. And she was in therapy for years, so her self-knowledge and awareness of that was, well, no, if I have surgery, I haven't resolved what's behind it, so it's not going to sort it out. That's a difficult time, isn't it, with those many layers of, as you said, people's opinions and being so told what to do. And
yeah, and I think you're touching on how important it is to really be aligned with your health decisions. That's something I very much tell the people I work with is the choice has got to be yours. Even if you do what somebody else says, you've got to make sure that that is the choice that you make, to do what they're telling you because it feels right. But we can't find that in ourselves, that rightness in ourselves, if we're constantly bombarded with all of this stuff, and it's triggering our old wounds, and we don't know what's coming from somebody else, and we don't know what's ours and theirs, and we don't know where our boundaries are. So this emotional healing work is really important. Really, the point I'm coming to, this superpower that we have, which is our feeling and our sensitivity, when we carry those emotional wounds, it becomes distorted. It really becomes our superpower when we do that healing work, because once the historical stuff is out of the way, the really heavy charged stuff, and we become comfortable with feeling what needs to be felt in our experience, and we allow it to move through us, then it's we have the ability then to really use that superpower to undo and unravel the roots of what the disease is. So, for example, what I'm describing is if the onset of the disease process is an emotional event, first we need to become aware of what that event is. We need to connect to it. And sometimes that's a little bit of a journey to find that.
So you're talking about the one that's happened more recently that's actually sparked?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
But then when we connect to that and we find out what it is, and we have our aha that kind of makes the connection to go, oh yes, oh my God, that was it. Then we've got to deal with the emotional charge that's around that situation. Now, if you've done your clearing work and emotional energy can move through you freely, that can be a very quick process. But if you're uncomfortable with feeling and you resist it, then that's a sticky process and can take a lot longer. So the key really to refining and honing this gift, this superpower, is learning to deeply feel without resistance. And you know, that my sense is what I've seen from my own journey, and I wonder whether people will resonate with this when they listen to it. As an empath, I think you always feel like, well, if I said you've got to feel, they're probably going to say, but I'm already feeling too much. Oh my God, what do you mean I've got to feel? I am feeling. Yes, you are. But my sense is, from my own journey with this, is that what you're actually feeling, if it's difficult and it's overwhelming, what you're feeling is resistance. You're not actually feeling completely, deeply the actual energy that is wanting to actually move through you and be released and let go of. Now, I'm not saying all of those energies are easy to feel. They're not. You know, we are carrying not just our lifetime's worth of stuff. We're carrying, however you want to describe it, past lives, other lives we've had. We're carrying ancestral trauma. You know, we are clearing so much right now, and especially the empaths and the sensitives of this world. We are the leaders here in this field, and this isn't easy. It isn't easy work. But this is,
doesn't it?
It is, takes commitment. But this is like who you are. This is your gift to the world. This is our time. Because we are so needed right now. The energies on the planet are shifting. They're supporting who we are. I think you spoke to it earlier when you said, you know, there's more of a sort of heartbreaking opening going on with certain triggers on a kind of collective cultural level. So, and I believe that it's the kind of frequencies on the planet that are really enabling a lot of this to shift. And of course, you know, also at the moment, we've got a lot of change going on. And I think in the coming years, the people who are not so sensitive are going to need us. So we need to do this work, not just for ourselves, but for the planet. This is why we're here.
And the other thing is, what I kind of realised, just to say, I've just done a money course with 18 women, and the depth of them feeling their pain and really moving into it and through it and sharing it in a safe space has been absolutely off the scale. And I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But the women it's attracted, nearly all empaths, not everyone, but nearly all, their openness and their shock at other people's openness and the similarities has just been incredible. And I always say to them, you know, there's, I don't know, 18 of you here, what I think it is now, and the ripple from you doing this stuff will be phenomenal. So, for instance, you know, your illness is, do you call it an illness? Yeah.
I don't see it like that anymore, but maybe
Right.
That's another discussion.
There you go. So that general label, though, that the transformation it's brought to you is just huge, isn't it? And I was talking to a guy today who's he's had cancer and he's just got pneumonia. And I only saw him on Saturday, met him for the first time, and we were talking about that and the fact it's kind of given him a gift because he's doing this and he's looking after his parents, he's doing that and he's trying to do this and now he's got to sit with it and just be with it and listen. And he was, oh, you're so right. I can't believe you're here. We're talking about this now. This is exactly what I've been kind of on the edge of feeling. Yes, and sometimes we need someone else to help us and allow us to feel it as well, don't we? I think to hear us. And
yeah, so you've touched on something actually that I really wanted to mention is the difficulty we have with just feeling. You know, there are reasons why we have resistance, right? Because we had to survive throughout our life up to this point. So we have these strategies to stay away from feeling because it wasn't safe to feel in the past. So it very much we need to find the right kind of people to support us to learn that, because we never had the right environment as children. Often we haven't learned the skills in ourselves to really just let what needs to move through. And this gets embedded at the level of the nervous system. So quite often as empaths, we don't feel safe in the world with good reason. And we need to learn that safety within our nervous system. The main thing about really healing our emotional wounds is we need to feel safe enough to do that. So I don't know if you know much about the nervous system and the window of tolerance.
No, tell me more. Sounds fascinating.
So the window of tolerance, I'm just wondering if can I share a link?
Yeah, of course you can. I think I need
Let me just do a little bit of dancing about here.
You should be able to share now.
Okay.
The window of tolerance.
Well, not so much a link. I got a little image up earlier in case we got around to talking about this. Okay.
And that feeling of safety is huge, isn't it? I can remember that I really got a while ago that I'd never ever felt safe in my body.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to. Now I've been researching about empaths and about us not really being embedded in our lower body and our lower chakras especially. Now I've been working with that and I feel it when I'm out walking the dogs. I really do feel my groundedness and I am feeling much more safe. So
amazing. Yeah. And actually this, it's the work of Stephen Porges polyvagal theory that this comes from, but I haven't read his work. apparently it's quite complex. I've come across other teachers who have studied it and kind of distill it into a much more understandable format. So you might want to look at somebody called Deb Dana. She's a really good resource.
How do you spell her surname?
It's D-A-N-A.
Oh, thank you. Right.
And there's another guy called Matt Licata, Licata. He does amazing work as well. And both of these people I found really helpful. So Stephen Porges says safety is the treatment. We cannot digest our emotional traumas so that they can release if we don't feel safe enough to do it. And feeling safe is about being in this window of tolerance here, the green area of the on the screen in the middle. So it's about learning then when we go into what's called hyperarousal and when we go into hypoarousal. And both of those I understand to be stress states. The hyperarousal is more obviously a stress state. You know you feel stressed, emotionally distressed, you're overreactive, you have unclear thoughts. And, we didn't learn in our family environments often, we didn't have an environment of safety. So how do we know how to come back to it? How to come back to it? Because nobody ever showed us. I think it's less obvious when you're in hypoarousal that you're also stressed. But what happens is here, this is the nervous system basically operating. So often when there's too much hyperarousal, when things are completely overwhelming, there can be a cutoff point where the nervous system goes just enough and it sends us into shutdown. So we get depressed, lethargic, we go numb, we can't do anything, we're not interested, we want to sleep a lot. It's a little bit like a freeze state. When an animal really feels under threat, it just freezes. So it plays dead. So hopefully the predator goes away.
And that's what drugs do, isn't it?
That's what do?
That's what antipsychotic drugs do as well, isn't it? They bring someone from the hyperarousal into the hypo. I had a client the other day, and it was so obvious even looking at her, she was absolutely in the hypo, because the drugs have brought her down into it. And that's partly why people sometimes need to be in hospital when they're in that state. It's very difficult to function.
Very difficult. And I think they do try and find a balance, don't they? Mm-hmm. But they have to kind of initially play about with the dosage to find it.
Yeah.
So this is key here about learning to get into your window of tolerance so you can feel safe enough to digest the emotional, energetic energy that is held in the body from past emotional wounds. So I'm going to stop sharing that. So, and there's various ways, and this has to be an exploration and a learning in your own self to discover the ways that you can bring your nervous system back into a level of safety, and also learning to feel in your body when you're starting to go into either of those states. So it's very much about learning skills in order to bring yourself down out of hyperarousal and out of hypoarousal. And
once again, the balance is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Coming back in. Yeah.
And when you carry a lot of trauma, there's your window of tolerance can be very narrow. So, but gradually, as you digest these emotional experiences through your superpower of healing, then the window of tolerance gets wider and life becomes a bit easier.
Lovely. So, just to ask, is this what you do with your clients then?
I will do. Yeah, I will do if that's what they need. So I very much work on an individual basis because I'm not just working with say a group of empaths where there's a common sort of maybe problem like that, but I'm working with a group of women where the common problem is breast cancer. And that might be all sorts of women with all sorts of personality patterns and history, some of which might be empaths and sensitives, and some of which might not be. So it's very much dependent on what the person needs and where they are. So what I wanted to do is just take us through a short sort of guided meditation, if you like, around really helping you get a taste of how to work with emotions and feelings that come up when you get triggered or something like that. Now, there's just a caveat to this I want to bring in, and it's around trauma. And I think it's really important to understand, because this was a real game changer for me. I'd engaged with lots of teachers, lots of practices, lots of things that could help in order to try and heal myself over the years, lots of programs that seemed to work really well for the majority of people. And they would for me up to a point, and then often I'd get to a point where they wouldn't. And I used to think there was something wrong with me because of that. And it's a common theme of trauma to think there's something wrong with you. So just watch that narrative in yourself. And I think it's really important to understand that many practitioners out there are not trauma informed. So some of them will say things to you like, if this isn't working for you, it's because you're not doing it right, it's because you're not practicing enough, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But often it's not. Often, we're wired up very uniquely. And even something like simple breath work, which, is an amazing tool for people, can actually be triggering for some people, because it just triggers something in the nervous system that sets off the trauma. So pay attention to that. And when I'm taking you through this experience, if you have something come up that feels overwhelming and difficult, then I would say stop. Just pay attention to that and honor yourself. Now, there's two things I would give you if that situation arises to help bring you back into the window of tolerance. One thing would be stop paying attention to what I'm guiding you to do and come to your feet. Bring your attention to your feet. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel your seat in the chair. Feel the weight of you here. And just pay attention to your breath, long, slow, deep breaths. And maybe put your hands on your body somewhere over your heart. You can even do some heart breathing, so as though you're breathing in and out of your heart. And that can really help calm the system down. So the other thing you can do, if it's really intense, is, because I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, is to open your eyes and start looking around the room and naming things. Name really mundane things. Pieces of paper, the yellow paint on the wall, the plug, the light, because what that does is it reorients you to the here and now in a really functional way. And that can also really help calm things down. So there's nothing wrong with you if this gets triggered. It's just showing you where, just pay attention maybe to what triggered it, and just notice what pushed you out of that window of tolerance. So those are two ways that you can bring yourself back.
Thank you.
Okay, so are you ready? Probably going to be, I'll try not to go longer than 10 minutes because I know we'll need to wrap up. So I invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. If not, just sort of let your gaze soften on something in front of you. Let it rest on something in front of you. And then slowly just start to pay attention to your breath. Just noticing the flow of breath coming into your body and leaving your body. And as you pay attention to your breath, just allowing it to slow down, get a little bit deeper. Maybe feeling it coming into your belly. And then allowing your attention to come more deeply into the body, feeling your feet on the ground, feeling the contact of your body with the chair you're sitting in. And maybe more subtle sensations like the touch of the clothes on your body. These subtle movements of air on your skin. And now bringing your attention more deeply inside the body. And just noticing what sensations there might be here in the body. You've already clocked the sensation on the outer layers of the body, but now you're inside. What's going on? They may be quite intense, they might be subtle, they might be comfortable, they might be uncomfortable, but just noticing and letting them be as they are. You can even bring your hands to some parts of the body that feel good to you, so that you can feel your own holding of your own self, your own way of comforting yourself and reassuring yourself. So you're just coming to this gentle stillness with what's here and what's going on in the body. And now noticing those sensations, just noticing if there's an emotional element to it. There might be more than one emotion that you're aware of. You're just noticing that this emotion, which you probably have a name for, is actually a sensation in the body. It's an energy in the body. So just coming back to that emotional sensation in the body and feeling it as pure sensation and nothing else. And as you're feeling that sensation and you're in contact with it, just start to notice if there's any thoughts or any words that are coming to you as you're paying attention to it. There may be and there may not be. You're not trying to specifically look for anything. Just notice if something bubbles up. And if you do have some words, then in your mind's eye, I'd like you to actually see them as words. So imagine that you can put them in a picture frame and hang them on the wall and read those words as though they're a piece of art. Or imagine you can write them in your journal and you see yourself writing them and you see them on the page. And then just look at these words. See them written as words. They're just words. But now check back in with your body as you read these words. Is there a reaction in your body as you read these words? Is there a bodily felt resonance or response to these words? And bring your attention there. And if you had no words, just keep staying with the sensation, any sensation that you're aware of. So now fully presenced with this sensation in the body, just feeling the size of it, the shape of it, really diving into it and exploring it. What's its nature? What does it feel like? And then just notice as well, as you're feeling this sensation in your body and you're exploring it, if any pictures pop up in your mind, there might be, it might be a still picture, or it might be a moving picture, like something's playing like a movie. It might be a memory. It might be something you're imagining in the future. Just notice if there's a picture. And just look at the details of that picture. Explore it like it's a photograph you're looking at. And then again, check back in with your body. Is your body having a response to this picture? Is there a new sensation, or is the existing sensation that you had changed in any way? And just coming back to this sensation in your body, and full presence and awareness on this sensation. And now just allowing this sensation to rest in your presence and your awareness. There's nothing to do with it. You don't need to change it. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to heal. You don't need to make it go away. Just let it be. Just resting with this sensation. Just being. This beingness, this is you. The sensation and the images and the words, these are just experience. These are the things that arise in you and fall away. And then very gently just bringing your attention back to your feet, contact with the ground, bottom on the chair. Noticing your breath. And gently opening your eyes when you feel ready.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that quickly.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, isn't there? My words were, I can't do this.
You can't.
I can't do this.
I can't do this.
Which is a bit of a mantra that pops up for me quite often. Become very aware of it recently.
So that I can't do this for you, thanks for sharing that, Rosemary, is an expression of the emotional energy in the body that it's tied to. So the words and the pictures and the sensation, I think, like an upside down triangle, they form an identity that isn't you. And when you presence deeply with the sensation in the body and you pay attention to what it throws up, and then you come back to the sensation and you repeat that until there's a shift, or there may not be a shift, you just repeat that. Eventually that emotional energy or that sensation will digest. This is how to digest it, and this is how to feel without resistance. And by the way, if resistance pops up, it's then, okay, where is that resistance in the body? Just, can you let that be there? Can you let that rest in what you are? And this is how things unravel.
Sort of following the chain through your body, is it?
Yeah.
One place to the next, to the next, to the next. Yeah. Interesting. I shall play with that. I've got a pain in my shoulder come up the last couple of days, and towards the end of the day, it became like a easy thing. So,
yeah, our bodies are talking to us all the time.
Aren't they just? Yes. Thank you. Natty, thank you so much. So tell us, how do people find you? Where?
So my website is lovebeinghuman.co.uk. I run a group on Facebook called Breast Cancer. It's not a group, sorry, it's a page. I have a Facebook page called Breast Cancer Thrivers. If you wanted to email me, it's natty@lovebeinghuman.co.uk, or you can use the contact form on the website.
Lovely, and I'll add these to the video on YouTube as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Welcome. I hope that's useful for people. If there's any questions, then please do let me know, because obviously I've taken you through quite a quick experience of something that can be a much deeper process that's very powerful. And, you know, we need to often we need guidance to really help us learn how to do that. So if it's difficult for people to do that, please don't beat yourself up. It's completely normal to find that challenging if you've never learned the skills.
Lovely. And what do you do in your Facebook group?
It's not a group, it's a page. So, I mean, I'm sharing obviously bits about my journey, things that are useful. And I offer quite a lot of different ways of looking at breast cancer and different information that can be really helpful as well.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. Big insight into being empaths, which we all wanted. Please contribute wherever you feel in the empath group, and bring people there if you like. It's our group. It's not just for women, it's for men as well. That there aren't any men there yet. And so feel free, if something comes up for you, Natty, or for anyone who's watching, come and share it there, please. I've had a lot going on, so I haven't shared very much recently, so it hasn't been very active in that way. It's taken my energy to sort of put these on and do other things. Running my money group has taken an awful lot of energy, and that's been very interesting as an empath, looking at all those faces on the screen, up to 18 women, all going through something really deep, and at the same time not totally overwhelming myself with all their emotions. I've been much more successful at it than I was 2 years ago. That comes with that self-knowledge, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, we're all a work in progress, aren't we?
We are. Lovely. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Natty. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you very much for watching, whether you're watching now or in the future. And keep in touch with Natty and the group, and let us know how you're getting on. Bring any questions. Don't struggle with this by yourself. There's plenty of help out there, and guidance as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.